Jesus is teaching. And he says these things. A student is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the student to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, then how much more the members of his household? Do not be afraid of them. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. The very hairs of your head are numbered. So don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be members of his own household. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. The word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. This is the most condemning passage in the Bible, I think. He's telling us we have to hate each other more. No, he's telling us we need to love him more. He's using the word, the transcribers, the people who have a new version, trying to find the words that fit when you move them from Hebrew, from Aramaic, from Greek into English, and then translate it again into a little more modern English, and then more modern English yet, and then another more modern English, until we have easy or English, simple English language Bibles, and we have Bibles for women. I don't know what God's trying to tell you that he didn't tell me. So you explain that. But it sounds like such a condemnation that unless we give up our families, unless we give up our friends, unless we give up everything, there it is. We need to give up everything in our life that separates us from Christ. And that's what he means about your enemies may be in your family, because you may have a family member who scoffs at your beliefs, who challenges you because you go to church and listen to that poppycock that they keep telling you from up front. And it isn't true. You have to separate yourself from that. And that's what he's talking about. You have to separate yourself. Not that you have to hate your mother, don't have to hate your father. You don't need to go for psychological counseling just because you have a rift in the family. But what he wants you to understand is that you cannot listen. No, you can listen, but you cannot hear the ones in your family who come at you with arguments against your belief, unless they're willing to listen to your arguments for your belief. Because that's where the separation is are you confident in the love of God? Abram's wife said, get rid of that slave woman because her son is picking on my son. They don't play nice together. Well, Ichabod was older, and so he could tease the little one and have a lot of fun doing it. And so they cast cast her out into the desert. And as they ran out of water, she gave Ichabod the last of her water and put him under a bush and lay down to die. At which point God said, I hear you. Maybe we aren't desperate enough in some of our thinking and in some of our reasoning. Maybe we aren't desperate enough for God to finally hear us. I had a little fun with the call to worship this morning. I don't know whether you noticed there were some tongue-in-cheek words there or not. But I had a little fun with that one because that's where I am every once in a while. About Thursday, when things haven't gone right at all week, I'm feeling really sorry for myself. And then I got to remember, hey, Ichabod was dying in the desert. And God said, I'll not only save him, I'll make a great nation of him. Well, we would have just assumed he hadn't kept that promise. But it's his promises, and he keeps them. Because Ichabod is the father of Ishmael. I'll get it right. Got the headless horseman on my mind. Ishmael is the father of the Muslim religion. He told Abraham, remember, I promise you that your sons will be nations. Not just one, but nations. So Abraham fathered the Jewish religion, and his lineage sired Christ. So that makes him Christian, his, and Ishmael, the Muslim. So all the three major religions were the product of Abraham, because God said to Abraham, you're 90 years old, and I will give you offspring that will make nations. And finally he believed. Sarah laughed. Probably drank a little after that too when he said, you're going to get pregnant. You're 91. What the heck? A little wine might ease that one a bit. But God is there when we need him, when we are willing to admit that we need him. God is there when we need him. And he will give us what we need, not what we want, not what we desire, not what we wish for, but what we need. And even in the darkest times, we need to be able to trust those promises. That's what Jesus is talking about when he said, I'll set mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, I'll set son against father and daughter against mother. Because if they aren't on board with your beliefs, then you have to separate yourself from them. If they're not willing to listen to your beliefs, you have to separate yourself. Because to sit and listen and listen and listen is destroying your confidence in the credence of God. So yeah, it's a negative passage. It's one that I hate to see come up every 3 years. And we get to preach it again. And yet, every once in a while, we need to stop. We need to pause. We need to remember that our own little pity party is ours. It doesn't belong to God. But God wants to know what our real problems are. God wants to know what our real trauma, our real problems might be. Because God is invested in us. God has given himself to us. He gave his son that we would know him. And if we have those who scoff and say, no, he didn't do that, then we must be against them. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. Hate is a big emotion, and hate can be moved, and hate can be shaped into love. So it's not the opposite. Rather, it's a competing emotion. It's a fighting emotion. But at least it has power. And the opposite of love is indifference, which has no power. It's just there. So when we When we read a negative passage in the Bible, we have to remember that we don't take one line, we don't take one verse, we don't even take one chapter as the whole meaning. They tell me, when I'm a lectionary preacher, I admit it. I go through the Bible every 3 years. And it's the same words. But you know, I've never been able to preach the same sermon 3 years later, because I'm at a different place in my relationship with God. And if we're not, each one of us, trying to find a new place where we are one with Him, that we can demonstrate that love, that we can demonstrate what it is that He is to us, then we're joining the other side. I don't know about you, but we used to have some great family reunions, and we centered them around my father and my mother and their descendants. And in the year 2000, 87 of us gathered in Bullhead City for my dad's 100-year reunion. He had 87 living descendants, either by blood or by marriage, and 87 showed up. And it was really wonderful because we had $8 rooms at Harris, and you could put as many people in a room as you wanted to. Remember back in 2000 when, boy, things were good. But reunions are where we confront our enemies. We confront our relatives. We don't get a chance to choose them. We're blessed with them, or cursed with them. We get to pick our friends, we get to pick our mates, we get to pick most of our family, but not all. And that's when Jesus said, God will set you against others in your family. Not because He wanted you to hate them. That's a lousy word, and it's a word that belongs to the transcribers and the interpreters. He wants you to understand that you cannot fraternize with them. You cannot walk with them. You cannot buddy up to them. I'm trying to think of vernacular that in this day and age that fits. You can't dig them, man. That's about 40 years ago, right? Okay. You what? You can't hang with them. There you go. You can't hang with them because they're wrong. And if you hang with them, they'll make you wrong. I don't know. Any of you in here parents? Any of you ever tell your kids, don't hang around with that bunch, they'll get you in trouble? Well, God's speaking the same language that we speak to our kids. Don't hang around with them. Oh, but how can we make them better if we don't hang around with them? Well, let somebody else make them better. You stay away. I mean, aren't we elitists? Aren't we? Hate is such a terrible word, but it's the one they plug in. Hate is a terrible word, but it's the one that the interpreters feel fits the severed relationship comment of Christ the best. And hate's not a good word. Hate's not a good emotion. Hate's not where I think it ought to be. But we ought to be brave enough. We ought to be strong enough. We ought to be bold enough to challenge even our mother-in-law or our brother or our sister-in-law or whoever who does not have a good view, an open view, an honest view, and an ear that will listen. That's what he meant. You didn't have to fight them, you don't have to kill them, you just have to be able to talk to them, and if they won't listen, don't have to agree, but they have to listen. So you have an opportunity. Then don't speak to them. Or if you have to go to a reunion where you talk about Uncle John, who's over there sipping wine and falling on his face, and we won't talk about the God, we won't talk about religion, we won't talk about any of the important stuff in life, we'll talk about Uncle John. And I think every family in the world has an Uncle John somewhere. God said, or Jesus said, my Father will set son against father, daughter against mother. and you have to hate them. No, Jesus didn't say hate them. The interpreter said hate them. Jesus said, in effect, avoid them. If they won't listen, don't talk to them. If they want to talk, don't listen to them. Avoid them. Because your enemies may be the closest people to you. For if they don't have a view of Christ, they don't have an openness in their heart, they don't have a willingness to understand what you believe, then they are your enemy. So the words are there, and if you just read them, or they're terrible. They're the worst part of the Bible until you realize what it is that he really is saying about it. It's not saying you have to hate the person. You have to be able to avoid their beliefs. Now, Uncle John I can hate. No. I came back from Glendale with a renewed lease because I get to be another year. And you're going to get to hear me another year. Except for a couple weeks coming up, and then I'm going to go away. Anyway, I'm glad to be back. I've said it to my cohorts in the business. I have the best pastorate in the whole conference. When I look at the accomplishments of this church and the dedication of this church, it makes me realize how little I've had to do with it, and how wonderful, how really wonderful this congregation is as a whole. I'm not going to pick out individuals. I'm not going to point any fingers at who is or isn't, but this congregation is fantastic, and I thank you for listening to me. Lo, these many years, and it's been a while. But let's keep on. Let's talk to each other. Let's listen to each other. Let's walk hand in hand with each other, that we might reach the goals that God would have us to be, to do, and to know in this church, in this community, in this God's kingdom. Join me as one with him. Amen. We got, I know, we're going to sing a good song coming up. We're going to sing, Lord, You've Come to the Lake Shore, 344. Would you stand with me?